beyond the calculation, at the heart of it, at least in concept, is the idea of getting companies to think in a forward-looking way and to actually not only calculate, but to trust metrics about what might happen in the future. So talk to us about that idea, the kind of mental shift to get senior executives to think about future-looking metrics.
Yeah, I mean, it's essentially that you need to be really interested in creating sustainable value, meaning creating future value. So for example, if you have a company and essentially you just try to fool around, focusing on short-term profitability, but doing all the tricks, for example, if you need to increase profit, you just drop down or you cut down all the advertising expenditures. Of course, you increase current profitability. However, the drawback is very likely if you cut down advertising spendings, you didn't acquire new customers. Those new customers are not going to generate profit in the next periods. And so therefore, you won't see the future value that you need to really create a sustainable business. So certainly you need to be interested in really creating sustainable value.
And what about the challenges when you talk to managers about this and they say, yeah, I'm with you in concept, but I'm not sure that my shareholders are going to rely on estimates that are guesses or forecasts. My old metrics might be flawed, but at least I'm measuring them with some certainty.
I agree. I mean, there's some kind of education going on. So personally, I'm always surprised. If I would be an analyst, the number one metric I would ask for, that would be the retention rate, because that would give me a decent estimate about what's very likely going to be on in the future. So, I mean, analysts or most analysts currently are not asking for those metrics. So there's some kind of tendency for managers to relax, to say, okay, if the analysts are not asking for, why should we go for it? However, if you see the other way around, you could also set it up as an internal performance measurement system. So if you have good metrics there, or if you have a good a performance measurement system, taking future value and naming customer equity into account, you have a much better system to evaluate your employees. You have a much better system to reward your managers on long-term value that you create, and very likely you will much better succeed in the market, even if the markets are going to downgrade you for a quarterly result, but they will kind of learn that obviously you're really creating long-term value.
It's interesting that you talk about those external motivations as well as the internal. Well, where do you see that the balance between them? Like in the future, as we hopefully move towards a world where customer equity is calculated and reported, is most of the pressure going to be companies wanting to demonstrate the value that they have, or external constituents demanding to see it?
That's difficult to say. I mean, it's certainly clear if analysts would start asking that question, and by the way, in particular for companies that rather recently had an initial public offering, for example, companies that are a bit related to the internet, or such as, I mean, Netflix is a little bit older in terms of the IPO, but they report a huge number of customer metrics like profit per customer. They used to report the retention rate. They also provide some estimate about how expensive it is to get a customer. But if you look at, for example, nowadays you have companies like Facebook and Twitter, you get a good estimate about how much profit they make per customer, but you have very little information about how loyal their customers are and about predictions about how strongly they intend to grow the company. So if analysts would ask for, certainly management would have to change. But I mean, my point is, if you believe this is the better system, why should you wait for someone to force you to change it? Why don't you implement it and move ahead? And then sooner or later, markets will realize that this is a good concept.